You may recall my stinky washer video from earlier this year. My Whirlpool washer really isn't that bad, but it has required tuning up as it's gotten older. But it's really worth it. I mean, better some work tuning it up than it going into the landfill or paying $1,000 for a new one. Today's journey involves replacing the washer's shock absorbers and its drain hose. Last week, I didn't even know washers had shock absorbers, but it makes perfect sense for something that spins at close to 1500 RPMs and with an unbalanced and heavy load. Ours was shaking pretty wildly on the spin cycle and threatening to walk out the front door. This must be a common problem, and I found lots of videos on shaking washers and their bad shock absorbers, but none that matched my Whirlpool Sport Duet washer. So that's why we're here today. My first question was, how do I know if my washer's shock absorbers are bad? Well, to determine that, you first need to open up the access panel on the front. But of course, before you go in there, you should unplug it so you don't look like this guy. As I mentioned in the stinky video, you should get familiar with removing this because it's how you access the drain pump, and that's the thing you need to clean out pretty regularly. Once the access panel is removed, look at the base of the shock absorbers to see if there's a pile of dried grease flakes. If there is, the shock is likely bad. To check for sure, you then need to remove the nut on the bottom of the washer that holds the bracket in place for one of the shock absorbers. Carefully tip the front of the washer up and put a block there so you can access the bottom of the washer. Other washers have a plastic bracket instead of this metal one with a screw and nut. Once the nut is removed, check to see if the shock absorber has any tension left in it. If it moves easily, then it's shot. All four of mine were really loose like this, so they're all bad. The top part of the shock absorber just needs to be turned 90 degrees to be removed. There are release tabs on it, but eventually I just skipped that and found that it came free if I just turned it with a wrench. You can see the slot that the top part of the shock absorber goes into here clearly. So that's what I'll insert it into and then twist 90 degrees. The drum of the washer is held aloft by two large springs, but I chose not to test them and instead replace the shocks just one at a time. The replaced shocks I got from Amazon don't include the metal bracket that I needed, so I needed to transfer those over from the bad shocks. It was easy. Just to show the difference between the shocks, you can see here the old shock and see just how floppy it is, and certainly it's not stiff. And the new one, you actually have to apply a certain amount of force to get it to move at all. So clearly the old ones were bad. The top of the new shock is then inserted into the slot and then twisted 90 degrees to latch. You can then pull the bottom of the shock down so that the screw in the bracket goes through the bottom of the washer, and then you can just thread the nut on. So then it's just kind of rinse and repeat for this one on the right side of the drain pump. So once again, I moved the metal bracket over to the new shock absorber and quickly installed it. Okay, moving on to the back so I can replace those rear two shock absorbers. I think all these fasteners are actually 1/4 inch hex head. Not really sure I understand the purpose of these plastic clips on the back, but I saw others remove them, so I removed them too. Okay, with the last screw removed from the back, then it was easy to just pull it out a little bit and slide it down. And this allows us to then see the two shock absorbers in the back, and we have pretty good access there. Okay, same as the front, I'm just going to prop this up with a block of wood. And that allows us to see both of the rear shock absorbers and also the little grease flakes that are at the base of each, so they're both bad. This cross beam in the back slides up and out easily out of the way. And again, the rear two shock absorbers are the same as the front, so it's really pretty straightforward. Just remove the nuts and then twist the top 90 degrees. And then here, once again, I'm just moving that metal base over to the new shock. Okay, now onto the drain hose. I put a rag underneath because as soon as you pull out the drain hose, some water is going to spill out, so I didn't want that to stay in the bottom pan. And of course, then just with a pair of channel locks, it's relatively straightforward to move this clamp back so that the drain hose can be pulled away from the pump. So now on the back side of the washer, it's just a matter of removing some clips from the drain hose to get it out. This clip was a little harder to release. I don't know why, but anyway, it just took some prying and then eventually it separated. With the clips removed from the hose, it's just a matter of sort of threading it out through the back and then threading the new one in. And of course, the hose clamp needed to be transferred over from the old hose to the new hose. And then of course the new clips have to be added to the new hose as well. So just as with the last video, I figured it was time for this to be cleaned out. So this is again the drain pump, and this is the little receptacle that catches lint and coins and other stuff that comes through there. And it tends to get pretty junky, as you'll see here. So I just used a rag to clean out this little catch basin as part of the drain pump. I'm also trying out these little pads that go under the feet of the washer just to try and mute the vibrations a little bit more. I will see how they work. So after wiping things down, it was time to put the back back on. So just as a test, I ran it for a few minutes with no clothes in it, and then I flipped it over to the drain and spin cycle just to make sure there were no leaks. Then of course there's the moment of truth with a full load in it and when it does its final spin cycle. And it held up pretty well. There's a little bit of vibration, especially as it spins down, but I suspect it's as good as it ever was. Well, I hope this helps you out with your washer. Take care.